college student was suddenly trapped by a lip-shaped rock crevice. He struggled desperately to break free, but the more he fought, the tighter he became stuck. Even more terrifying, his oxygen supply was running dangerously low, and not far away, his teammates were resting on shore, completely unaware of what was happening underwater. This is the cave diving incident at Alachua Sink that we're covering today. Alachua Sink is located in a wooded area near Alachua, Florida, in the United States. It is a typical sinkhole formed by karst geology. For most of the year, the water appears dark green, filled with large amounts of algae and fallen leaves floating on the surface. The clear water cannot be seen until about 40 meters inside the cave. The main cave system contains both upstream and downstream tunnels, with a known maximum depth of 70 meters. Because of its extremely low visibility and maze-like passageways, it is widely considered a highly advanced and dangerous dive site. Only during winter does the visibility improve enough to make diving conditions relatively safer. On the night of July 24, 1992, 23-year-old Lance Crawford and his diving partner quietly arrived at Alachua Sink. Both men were complete beginners in cave diving. They had earned their cave diving certification only a month earlier. At the time, the sinkhole was experiencing a seasonal algae bloom. Large amounts of silt and algae filled the water. Looking at the glowing green surface, his partner suggested coming back another day. But Lance had been preparing for this dive for a long time. Since they were already there, he insisted they should at least go down and take a look. In the end, his partner agreed. At 9 p.m., the two entered the water. Almost immediately, they realized it was a nightmare from the start. The darkness was so complete. It felt like entering a world where you could not even see your own hand. The pair could only rely on touch, slowly following the guideline they had laid themselves. It is important to note that they were using a real guideline, which is typically intended only as a supplementary guideline. To avoid becoming separated in the darkness, the two maintained constant physical contact. One diver led the way, while the other stayed directly behind him. However, when they descended to a depth of about 18 to 23 meters, they realized they could no longer find the entrance to the main tunnel. In the murky water, with visibility under 1 meter, they spent several minutes searching by touch, but found nothing. Eventually, they decided to abort the dive and follow the guideline back to the surface. That was when the tragedy silently began. As they turned to ascend, their bodies accidentally drifted apart, with absolutely no visual reference in the darkness. The partner mistakenly believed Lance was still ahead of him, so he continued swimming forward along the guideline. What he did not realize was that during the turn, Lance had unintentionally drifted off to the side and fallen behind. Worse still, in the confusion, Lance lost contact with the guideline entirely. Meanwhile, the partner continued ascending while retrieving the line, fully convinced Lance was somewhere just ahead of him. It was not until he surfaced completely that he realized Lance had never come back up. Without hesitation, he jumped back into the water and searched along the guideline several times. But in the near-zero visibility, he could find nothing. He knew that under conditions like these, once a diver lost the guideline, the chances of survival were almost zero. Left with no other choice, he climbed out of the sinkhole and called the police. After receiving the emergency call, professional cave rescue divers from the United States quickly arrived at the scene. However, even these battle-tested rescuers were shocked by the underwater conditions. In such an extreme environment, the search operation could only be carried out slowly by touch. Any tiny mistake could cause a rescuer to become lost inside the cave as well. After searching for quite some time, there was still no progress. In an attempt to improve visibility, the rescue team adopted an unprecedented emergency measure. They brought in fire trucks and continuously pumped clean water into the cave system. They hoped this would dilute the muddy water, because even a slight improvement in visibility could greatly speed up the rescue effort. However, because the cave system was enormous and underground currents constantly carried in new silt and debris, the measure produced almost no effect at all. Visibility remained unchanged. The rescue team had no choice but to switch to another plan. They divided the divers into multiple groups and rotated them in and out of the water to avoid extreme fatigue and the risk of decompression sickness. Each dive was strictly limited to 45 minutes. They carefully searched every corner of the main tunnel. As the seconds slowly passed, hope began to fade away. Everyone knew that even if Lance Crawford still had air left in his tank, he could not survive for very long in such extreme conditions. By the third day after the accident, the miracle everyone hoped for never came. But at last, the truth finally surfaced. One of the rescue divers felt a hard object. Inside a recessed crevice above the main tunnel, a space barely large enough for a single person. It was Lance Crawford's scuba tank. Moments later, they found Lance's body beside it. He was tightly wedged against the ceiling of the cave. His diving equipment was still completely intact, showing that, after losing contact, he had struggled in the darkness for a very long time. Most heartbreaking of all, inside the waterproof dive notebook he carried with him, were several hastily written words from the final moments of his life. Those words were never released publicly, but one can only imagine the level of despair Lance felt, trapped inside that narrow rock crevice. After the accident, investigators analyzed data from Lance's dive computer and eventually reached several clear conclusions. First, choosing to dive at night was itself an extremely reckless decision. Experienced divers already knew that Alachua Sink had notoriously poor visibility during spring and summer. Attempting a night dive there was considered extraordinarily dangerous. Second, the pair relied on a temporary reel guideline they deployed themselves. The line was not securely anchored and shifted constantly with the current, greatly increasing the risk of becoming lost. Finally, during the turn to ascend, they failed to maintain continuous physical contact. In near-zero visibility diving, that is one of the most important methods for preventing separation. Investigators believe that after losing contact with both his partner and the guideline, Lance first attempted to search for the line nearby, but in total darkness and zero visibility, he quickly became completely disoriented. In panic, he swam upward in an attempt to find the exit, only to accidentally enter a hidden crack in the rock wall. Desperate to return to the surface, he kept pushing farther inside. But once he entered that narrow space, he could no longer turn around or back out. All he could do was wait helplessly in despair until the air in his tank finally ran out. After the tragedy, authorities imposed much stricter controls on the dangerous cave system to prevent similar accidents from happening again.